To be the leader of the A-League is arguably the hardest job in Australian sport. John O'Neill was first, appointed as Chief Executive of the then FFA in the wake of the Crawford Report. He oversaw the creation of a new promise for Australian football, but had to tell the old clubs they didn't belong. Ben Buckley was next. He brought us grand old clubs like Gold Coast United and the North Queensland Fury. By the time that David Gallop came along, the tension between the clubs and FFA was palpable, leaving James Johnson to oversee the inevitable separation of Federation and League. Flying under their own flag, Danny Townsend sold the grand final, Nick Garcia disappeared as quickly as he came, and Stephen Conroy's always temporary stint saw the club's distributions crash. Now that list admittedly only tells one side of the story. All those names come with successes and failures. But the track record shows this is not a job for the faint-hearted. So with the league and clubs struggling for bums in seats, cultural relevance and financial sustainability, what comes next? That is up to Steve Rosich, the new CEO of the A-Leagues. My name is Lachie Avil. This is the Roundball Australia podcast. Joining me tonight, Jacob Stevens. Jacob, another interesting little bit of news coming across our desks today. The A-Leagues has a new head honcho.
Yep, somebody new to point all the blame at, I guess. No, it's certainly interesting, and we've seen a lot of discourse about his appointment already, and what people think of it, and his experience and his CV in sports administration in the past. But look, let's just for now look at this as the next phase of this league and for football in this country. It's certainly going to be interesting to see how it pans out, and of course it's very difficult to make a judgment before he's even had his first day in charge. But no, it's certainly an interesting piece of news, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it also kind of came out of nowhere, right? I don't think there was too much talk about this even being announced at any point soon, and all of a sudden today, just during the middle of the day, it's just, oh, by the way, there's a new guy he's going to be coming in and he's going to take over. So no, it'll be certainly interesting to see how he pans out. I'm sure we'll have a discussion on what we all think about it, but yeah, there's already quite a lot of discourse about it.
Yeah, Poletti, hello to you. I think the first reports were maybe had 20-30 minutes on the official announcement out of the APL today.
Yeah, it was pretty much it. And I want to, bounce off the back of a point Jacob just made there that, the fact that it came with no notice, that there's something the APL have been quite good at doing in the last few years, is sort of not having any leaks out of the organisation for the most part. It's something that a lot of sports teams and leagues struggle with. Now, some of those quote-unquote leaks can be planted stories that are deliberately leaked to the media, but, sometimes you just have sources because a lot of different people know each other and the like. And I guess, as much as a lot of people aren't happy as such that the APL is such a tightly operated ship and, operates in a lot of secrecy, stuff like this doesn't get leaked to the media, for better or for worse, I think. So that's something that, depending on which way you want to look at it, that they could be applauded for. I'll tell you what, though. Well done, Lachie. Great intro. Yeah, it's back. The intro's back.
Thank you.
I will say, though, not enough Greek references for my liking.
Yeah, that's a fair enough complaint. I don't know, I felt particularly poetic this afternoon as I was kind of crafting this episode. Maybe they'll stay, maybe they won't, who knows. But the intro is back at least for today. So, Steve Rosich, who is he? He is a sports administrator in Australia for at least maybe 25 years or so. He was the former CEO of the Freo Dockers in the AFL and also the Victorian Racing Club. So I guess a lot of the talk, Jacob, has been that, yes, Australian sports administration experience, not football experience.
Yeah, it's kind of a case of, on one hand, he's not a football person. On the other hand, he's not a football person. And I think that there's benefits and there's detractions for both of those points. Like, we want people that care about football and love football in these kind of roles, sure, but you've also got to remember that a lot of the time you just look at administration for football across this country and it's filled with football people, but they've all got different views and they're all very, I don't want to say egotistical, but very headstrong, right? And they have their perceived view of what football can be and how it's going to reach that. And, you know, we've spoken endlessly about the need for collaboration in our sport, and we just don't seem to see it all that often. It's a lot of individuals going, this is the way forwards, this is what we're going to do. So I think it might actually be a good thing that we've not got a football person in this role that isn't going to necessarily have those, you know, preconceived biases. That's you know, it could be a bit of a challenge, sure, to step into this environment where there are a lot of people clashing heads and things like that. But on the one hand, it does help, you know, not having that already there with him coming in. But yeah, that's certainly been, I think, the leading point among a lot of. I suppose he's already got detractors, right? I've seen a few comments saying that, you know, oh, well, you know, we're getting a, you know, former AFL guy in, like, what's that going to do? And, oh, he doesn't know football. That's not what we need. I think what you got to do is look at the history that he does have, right? And, you know, Fremantle, they've been through some tough times. I think it's fair to say. But in terms of a commercial output, at least during his time with Fremantle, it was pretty successful. Obviously, with the Victorian Racing Club, he's been pretty successful there as well, especially having to compete with the likes of New South Wales. So he's got that kind of, I suppose, history of being able to compete and being successful in you know, these very difficult sporting environments. Obviously, the AFL, like, easily the biggest sporting league in this country, right? Perhaps some of those people in New South Wales and Queensland will disagree with that, but you know, it's absolutely massive. There's a lot of competition, especially at that kind of club level. And then, yeah, in terms of racing, it is that big Victoria versus New South Wales thing. So I think, you know, that's the kind of experience he's going to be bringing to it, and it's really as well that commercial side as well, where he's had a lot of success in terms of sponsorship and things like that. And you know, I think that's going to be a big thing for football in this country. You know, being able to kind of bring those commercial connections, because okay, yes, he's not in the same role that he was in, you know, 5 years ago or whatever, but connections that you form in this business, they're not dependent on the role. It's person to person, right? So he's going to be able to bring those connections along to this new gig here in football, and that could be huge to kind of bring back perhaps a little bit of relevancy at that level for football in this country. It's something we're always talking about. You know, there's a lack of investment, sponsorship figures aren't massive, you know, broadcast deals aren't huge, that sort of stuff. And you know, we've seen some promising broadcast stats recently, which might help push things in the right direction. But this is going to help even more, right? Having somebody who already has those connections in the commercial world, has experience bringing them in and investing in sport, that could be massive for football. So while he hasn't actually done anything in this role yet, and I think he was saying he starts in January, right? You know, yep. There's at least kind of that groundwork there from his experience and his kind of resume that suggests that, you know, it might be a good fit. Obviously, we have to wait and see. But you know, I don't think it's as doom and gloom as some people are you know, kind of pointing it out to be. And for me to be saying that of all people, I think is yeah, I think that's a crazy thing.
So on the reaction, Poletti, I have a fair amount of empathy for him today, because, you know, through that intro, I listed all the previous essentially chief executives of the A-League. Of course, we have that, you know, Football Australia period, whatever. And it feels like you can go through the list and you can all core football fans in Australia, at least of the A-Leagues, could point at every one of those people and say, this is the thing you screwed up. And because of that sentiment, true or not, and some have been better than others, it feels like it literally doesn't matter who steps into this role. There is always going to be a certain level of negativity because people have been burnt before, and viciously so in some respects. So I think whoever comes under the gun is starting behind par, and they have to earn some credit in the bank. So I have a level of empathy there. But as Jacob says, he starts on January 5th, so he gets to enjoy his Christmas. And then he's stuck into it, and he's got a big 6 months ahead, obviously with negotiations for the new TV deal and the Players Union CBA as well. They are two critical deals that must be done well to set the platform for the next 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like, you know, as you said, to use the term you used, under the gun, it feels like he's very much, you know, under the gun with 5 big blinds, and, you know, they're about to go up on the next hand and he's in the big blind. So, you know, the pressure's on, and he doesn't have a lot of room to work with. To, you know, it's almost a now or never for him. It's straight into the role because the pressure's on from day one, and that's unfortunate. You know, I think I think one of the criticisms I had when we were discussing this morning in our little WhatsApp group was, again, that he's not a football person, and I want to see a football person in the role. And, Jacob, made some good points as well, but I don't necessarily mean football person in the way that others have been football people. And I'll bring up a tweet that Simon Hill posted probably about 20 minutes before we started recording. In the same week as more media jobs were shed at APL with good football people lost to the game, another non-football appointment is announced. Anyway, wish him all the best, but 3 basic requests. Number 1, be visible. Number 2, understand that football has its own culture. And number 3, have a plan. And to be honest, that's all I want. I don't care necessarily if he's a football person or not, but he needs to understand the game. Because, and I don't mean that in a, appealing to, the sickos like us, the ultras, the ones who are there every week. We're rusted on, we're tuning in. We can't wait for the next episode of, Total A-Leagues or Dub Zone or the weekly kickoff or whatever, ancillary content we're consuming. If you're listening to us, you're one of the sickos. We love you for it. It's like, he doesn't need to appeal to us. He needs to appeal to the football fan in this country that hasn't given the A-Leagues a chance in a decade. He needs to appeal to the football fan in the country who only plays the game, right? Like those are the sorts of people he needs to appeal to. And to do that, in my opinion, you need to understand the game, understand the nuances that come with that. It's not like AFL. It's not like NRL. It's its own entity. It's, bringing together the people who haven't cared about the A-League for 30 years for 20 years, right? Its entire existence, because their NSL team was kicked out. How do you get those people on board? Can you get those people on board? And understanding that dynamic between, to use a Danny Townsendism, old football and old soccer, new football, or whichever one it was. You guys know what I mean.
Yeah, you had it right.
I had it right. Good. One of the two I had was right. That's all that matters. And being able to, work like that, and that's not an easy job. What I will say is, I was talking to one of our listeners earlier today as well about it. And he actually made the point that maybe he has more A-League experience than we need to give him credit for, because the person I was speaking to said that the Wellington Phoenix are the Fremantle Dockers of the A-League. So he already knows how to deal with one of the teams.
What?
What? I don't even understand what the link is there. Anyway, I share a lot of people's I'd say concern, maybe the fact that he's not a football person. Yeah. And there is disconnect there, and we've seen what's happened in the past. When fan culture is not respected, when football traditions are not respected. So the part of me, the optimistic part of me, really hopes that even if he particularly doesn't fundamentally understand those values, the other people around, say the board of the APL, have understood their lessons.
Well, I mean, Stephen Conroy is still the chairman, correct?
Correct.
And so far, he's been a pretty decent steward for the game, right? I think he's represented the sport pretty well so far. So at least from that governance level of the board, they are still on that direction of understanding the sport. This is that executive appointment as CEO, where you want somebody with a good business sense that's able to actually provide tangible results for the sport. And I think that's as well, as long as the board can, like you said, Lachie, kind of stay on track and keep the sport's best interests in mind, they're going to be able to kind of herd him back in if he starts to do anything too crazy. So
and I think on Stephen Conroy, right, like you said you think he's represented the game well. I would change that sentence slightly to say that he's made good decisions for the game since he's been in there. But as the chief executive, Rosich should be the face. Like Danny Townsend was the face of that grand final decision, right? For better or for worse, he was the face of the organisation at that time. And that is what Rosich's role is going to be. So I actually spoke to someone who is a former employee of Rosich, and they said that two things that he will do well is that he will be a salesman for the league. He will present it in a good light, which was a very key point to what Alan Stajic was talking about a couple of weeks ago in that famous press conference. Now having someone to really be an advocate for the game. And they'll be across, Rosich will be across, things like TV deals and sponsorships and bringing in money, which arguably really are the two biggest priorities for the A-League at the moment. And, being that face is so important because, we've said it numerous times before. And I think to a certain extent, Jacob, the fact that this appointment is now here means it was coming for the last month or two, which to some extent you now understand why someone like a Stephen Conroy has been so quiet on some of these issues, because if a new CEO is coming in, let them deal with it. You could just come out and say, we're going to appoint a new CEO, which I think would have been the best version of those events. Mm-hmm. But regardless, you understand it a little bit. So now it's Rosich's job to essentially be in front of the camera, come up with a plan for the league, like Poletti said Simon Hill is asking for, but also then sell that to the people. And as much as the APL is a private organisation, we've said this before, football is the public good. So you have to get football people on board. You have to have everyone buy into a vision, and that's when you start pushing in the right direction.
And I think that's where we've kind of seen things fall apart previously, where it feels like decisions have been made and then explained, if that makes sense, rather than explained and then made. Obviously the big one being that grand final decision, which, at the time and still to this day, I think is up there as one of the worst moves in the governance of the sport in this country. But it was a case of, we're going to make this decision because it makes sense to us. People are asking about it. Okay, I guess we've got to explain ourselves now. It should always be the other way around. You should be explaining those decisions and educating people on them, and like you said, putting in place a plan and kind of showing people this is the pathway that we've got and that we've set forwards, and then actually executing on that. And that way as well, it kind of gives you the chance to troubleshoot things. If you think there might be something in there that's a little bit, well, you don't know if people are going to buy into it or not, it gives you that opportunity to kind of test the waters, but also gives you time to build support for something. If you think it is really worth it, if you go out early with it and say, hey, this is something that could be coming up down the line, and maybe people aren't sure of it at first, but you can continue to sell it and sell it and sell it, you can get that support. And then when you launch it, it isn't a drastic failure and everyone hates you. So yeah, I think it is kind of almost, that's where a lot of the failures in the past have been, in that it's been these short-term decisions have been made and then had to try and be justified and explained afterwards to the footballing public. Whereas it kind of feels like, and we've said it a bunch of times, a lot of the time the stakeholders are ignored in those processes, and are kind of the last to know almost, and then all of a sudden the decisions upon them and it's made and there's nothing much they can do about it. So hopefully this can maybe represent a shift in the way that those kind of things are done. And like you said, Lachie, if anything, he's a good salesman, so it seems like that's kind of something that he will be hopefully good at doing, or will look to do a lot of, is put the league forward first, and talk about things, build up excitement for it early on, rather than kind of leaving it to having to justify the actions that have already been made, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think it is interesting that no announcement that, hey, got a new CEO coming in has been made, when that's kind of exactly what I've just been talking about. But with the way that things have gone, like you said, it kind of also just makes sense to just let it happen, and just go with it. But also to the point that Poletti made earlier about, let's make sure that he's going to have this in place, this in place, this in place. I would hope that the APL were diligent enough to have made sure those kind of things, like what is your plan and strategy going to be, that they have thoroughly discussed that with him in advance before appointing him. But yeah, no, it'll be definitely interesting to see how it plays out and what he does for it. I'm hoping for the best, because I think, like everybody here, I want football to be as good in this country as it can be, and we've all seen the promise and the potential for it. So yeah, I think it is about flipping the way things have been done in the past, and making sure that we're building support for things before we launch them, rather than the other way around.
I want to jump on that, Jacob. to the first point you mentioned about decisions being justified after the fact, and I think that goes back to what I said earlier, which is that the APL, for better or worse, has been shrouded in secrecy this entire time.
Yeah.
Other sporting leagues in this country would have leaked that idea, specifically to certain sections of the media to gauge the public feedback, and that wasn't done with the grand final deal. It was just we all woke up on, that December morning, Monday morning. I had to drive back to Sydney because I was in Melbourne. Don't ask me why, because I don't remember. But I was driving back to Sydney, and I see it come across my timeline. It's just like, oh, that came out of absolutely nowhere. That was not probably supposed to happen. Sure, okay, let's see how this evolved throughout the day. And it just got worse and worse and worse the closer back to Sydney I got in terms of the public sentiment to it. So I'd definitely like to see a little bit more of that. To the second point there you made in terms of, his plan, his strategy and everything like that, and hoping he's got that in place. Now, this is something you and I will understand a lot. I reckon some of our listeners will understand it a lot. Lachie, maybe not so much. If we take the US sports approach, right, where you have the league's commissioners, so you got your why have I gone blank on all of them now? You got your Don Garber in MLS,
Roger Goodell.
You got Roger Goodell. You got Manfred. All of these, all of these different commissioners, right? And essentially, they're the public voice for the owners, right? They apply a similar role to what the CEO is, but they're the public voice for the owners, and they do what the owners want, right? They're the public whipping people. Is it too much of a stretch to say that the CEO role is not that different here in Australian sports, where, maybe there's a little bit of autonomy, but it feels very much like they are the public whipping people for the owners to get angry at? Was anyone angry at the owners over the grand final deal? No, they were angry at Danny Townsend. Why? Because Danny Townsend is the CEO. He was the public face.
And I think that was misplaced, just to add that in.
Well, once it started to come out that clubs had agreed to it.
Exactly. But what I'm saying is that Danny Townsend took the entire brunt of it. And yes, he got a pay packet that very much compensates him for that, or compensated him for that, I should say. That still doesn't change the fact that he was the whipping face for the APL at that time. And who's to say that the new CEO is not going to be any different to what Danny Townsend was, and he may or may not have the ability to do certain things, but at the end of the day, he's going to be doing what the owners want, and he's going to be the one taking the lashings for it.
So this is an important point of education as well. Like with the whole grand final deal, that was a unanimously accepted vote by the board of the APL. At least 5 of which people from the clubs nominated by the other clubs and voted in by the other clubs. They all said yes to that deal at the time. The same is happening here with Rosich and his appointment. This has been, Stephen Conroy is the chair of the board, but he's not the only person there. He's not solely making this appointment. This is a board of clubs. I have the list of names somewhere. There's a few. I think Casper Tafta, Pierce, Melbourne City,
Gina Mara
from Victory, Gina Mara from MacArthur as well, and there's a Silver Lake representative, there's a Football Australia representative, and there's a few others there as well. So this is a group of people who have said this is the right appointment to take us forward. So that's worth remembering as well. And I think, Poletti, the timing of this appointment also tells its own story. Ever since Stephen Conroy,
new year, new me.
No. Longer than that. Longer than just a year. Because ever since Stephen Conroy has come in as the independent chair, and then Nick Garcia left and Conroy steps in this kind of interim executive role as well, his whole kind of mantra has been right sizing and laying a platform for growth. And this is something Simon brought up in his post, and I'm looking right now at a comment that we received off some of our stuff today about the appointment, saying, quote, right-sized is a funny way to say we've actually let a lot of people go, in reference to that second round of media layoffs that the APL has done in the last few weeks as they look to transition more media responsibilities externally. And look, we all have mates that are part of the APL media team, and being made redundant is not fun, I'm sure, and it's horrible that this has had to happen. But obviously the whole idea of the right sizing, and this is what Conroy and how he's describing it, the idea of right sizing implies that you overextended in the first place. So, yeah, it's obviously horrible that these people have lost their jobs, but was it responsible to give them to them in the first place is the idea. And Conroy would say no, they've gone from a very significant loss to an operating profit in the last financial year just gone. And this appointment of CEO, and Conroy's quotes in the press release back this up, is that this is kind of the final part of that transformation period, Poletti. Hopefully all the, obviously we're looking at crowd numbers at the moment. We're not too happy with where they are. There probably is still a little bit more hurt to come, but the fundamental building blocks of growth, hopefully, that will come over the next 3 to 5 years have been laid. And this is the final one. So hopefully give him 6 months, give him a season, give him the World Cup to happen. But then after that does happen and the broadcast deal is signed, the CBA is signed, then really Rosich should be accountable for strong growth in the years afterwards.
I genuinely hope that's right, because as we've talked about, this is a very turbulent period. I'd just a couple of points that you made. I'd argue that maybe cutting members from the media department is not the greatest use of trying to save resources, and I'll use the crowd figures as an example. They're dropping and they're dropping fast, and I, as you said, I think there's still a lot of hurt to come. I think we're going to hit some new lows before the season is over, particularly when there's a lot more games that are outside of, the two major metropolitan centres in Sydney and Melbourne around, very similar to what we had last week. That, there is probably, I mean, let's look at Friday night, for example, right? You've got the two Sydney teams playing off Macarthur and Western Sydney Wanderers 2 hours apart from each other on the same night, and there's no other games in Sydney for the rest of the weekend. And there's only one game in Melbourne, which is the Derby. Now, conceivably, sure, the Derby should do 22-ish thousand, but those numbers have been on the decline as well. Victory still haven't sold out their entire away allocation as of the time of recording. So it's very much a situation where that number could even be hurting a lot more than what we would expect it to usually. And before you know it, we're looking at a sub 30,000 attended round again with a full six game slate. That's not a good look. I'd argue that keeping media visibility, particularly league sanctioned visibility, might have been a better use of money, because then you can promote things a lot better. You can have more. You don't have to rely on, something. I
don't think they're doing this to reduce their output. They're trying to make it more efficient.
Maybe,
right?
But I mean,
external.
if you've got less people to go around, that could mean more scheduled posts. And we know the difficulty of dealing with scheduled posts at times is you're putting content out when maybe something shouldn't be going out, or something should, because something else has come up and stuff like that. So you can end up with your wires crossed quite easily, and stuff gets lost in the shuffle. Look, I hope that the decisions the APL have made they've gotten it right, and that things will get better over the next 6 months, particularly across the A-League women. Something I'm incredibly passionate about. They've almost, not quite a do-over, but they've been given a second life, essentially. Sorry, Jacob, but it's like if you get dropped on 5 and you go on to make 82. You've got that second chance there to make things right. And that's what this Asian Cup represents for the A-Leagues, is a chance to learn from the mistakes of the Women's World Cup and not capitalising on that as well as they should have. With the fact that it's a tournament here on home soil, there's still A-League games to come in the immediate aftermath of the tournament. There's games going on before the tournament is even finished. Can you convince, people who maybe don't go to the A-Leagues, to A-League women's, A-League men games every single week, but live in Australia, to come to an A-League game after they've attended an Asian Cup game? That's going to be the big thing here, is just capitalising on that opportunity. Australia should go deep, so maybe there's Matilda's fever again. Probably not to the same extent, because an Asian Cup doesn't have the prestige of a World Cup. But as long as the A-League has a strategy in place to capitalise on that, this is a sentence that could come back to bite me. This should be near impossible to screw up for Rosich. But
why would you say that?
I'm saying, look, everything is lining up perfectly for the APL to take advantage of this.
You were complaining about commentators' curse earlier today, Poletti,
I was,
and
yes.
now you've gone and done that.
Look, I'm saying, but I'm saying the point is that everything is lining up, and all you got to do is roll the pin down the alley and knock him down.
So it's undeniable.
It's not as easy as it sounds.
No, it's not. And there's always a scale to these things. You know, what do you even define as succeeding and failing? It's a spectrum. But Poletti raises the good point, Jacob, that you have the Asian Cup starting in March. You have a Men's World Cup, which the Socceroos are primed to, hopefully get out of the group and probably challenge for a knockout stage win as well.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen what the buzz of a World Cup can do. We've seen what happened in 2006. We've seen how it can be royally wasted in 2022 with the grand final sale mere days after the Socceroos and Arnold Socceroos qualifying out of the groups. This is a prime opportunity. So the appointment is done now. He's got 2 months of a runway into the Asian Cup, and then obviously with the Men's World Cup as well. There is opportunity here.
Yeah, and it's a bit like appointing a coach for a team with a big tournament coming up, right? You want to give them that chance to kind of bed themselves in, give them an opportunity to figure things out.
The lay of the land.
That's right, yeah, exactly.
Learn the squad.
And then all of a sudden, okay, Asian Cup on home soil. A few months after that, you've got the Men's World Cup. I think the Asian Cup is one that I don't think is... I don't want to say it's easier to capitalise on, but it's on home soil, number one, which means that, a lot of the attention is going to be here in Australia, which is, it just, means that you're not having to try and, collate that attention that's going overseas back in here. It's already staying in the country. And we know how obviously massive the Matildas are and have been over the last few years and how kind of, again, I don't want to say easy, but how efficient it is to be able to channel a lot of that goodwill into the game. Obviously after the Home World Cup, we saw A-League women's attendances rise and things like that. So there's kind of already that pre-established way to do things when it comes to the Matildas that have shown to get results. It's obviously slightly different with the Socceroos. Like you said, really the last big one was probably that 2006 tournament. And I think the last one showed how to not approach it. Don't go out there and make these really, really massive decisions, in light of the success of the Socceroos. So yeah, it's look, I agree with Poletti in the sense that there are a lot of pieces there that can be put together to make this a really prosperous time for football in this country. But I think that also itself represents difficulties because they are such good opportunities that you don't want to screw them up. You don't want to make a mistake. You don't want to, fail to capitalise, or worse, as happened in 2022, completely blow up all goodwill that the sport has in the country. So it's a really fine line to have to walk, and it's going to be difficult. Obviously, this is again where it comes back to that conversation of he's not a football person, he doesn't understand the sport. It could take him more than a couple of months to kind of get into that groove and kind of understand how things work and how people feel and what their thought processes are, and that can then make these two massive tournaments even more difficult for him to try and manage. But look, we've just got to try and make sure that it's as positive as it can be. Fans keep showing up. At least to those national team games, of course, as Poletti mentioned, A-League attendances are a little bit down this season, which is disappointing to see, but there's any number of factors for that. But it's just continue to support the sport here and just give him that runway to be able to find success. I think is probably the key thing here, because the pieces are there, the groundwork is there, I suppose, in having these two massive tournaments coming up to be able to capitalise on it. But it's just making sure that he's got that ability to be able to do so, and that these opening first couple of months aren't just really tumultuous and crazy and full of problems and strife that kind of draw his attention away from those perhaps bigger picture opportunities and towards more sort of short-term spot fixes, and then all of a sudden the Asian Cup's here and it's, oh well, we haven't really planned all that much for it.
Spot fixing, geez, that's a interesting turn of phrase, isn't it? What I will say before because you look like you definitely wanted to say something, like I will get in here. I got lesson number 1 for Steve Rosich to become a football person. Lesson number 1: no pyro, no party.
Jeez. Okay.
Just to finish us off on this discussion, if we had if Rosich was in this call with us right now doing a podcast episode, if you're listening, by the way, we're more than happy to have you on. But if you could say one thing, one wish for his tenure as CEO of the APL, Jacob, what would it be?
Good luck. I think is probably, yeah. It's just look, football is a difficult sport to navigate. I don't think it should be any contention in me saying that it's tricky. There's a lot of parts at play, a lot of stakeholders that are all very passionate about it, and it's going to be difficult to manage that. But just good luck, basically, because like I said earlier, we all want this game to be as big as it can be, and I think as long as he doesn't do anything, like I said, immediately to get himself offside with the with the fan base and the football community, then it could be a really prosperous time for the sport in the country. So yeah, I think just good luck, deal with it well, and hopefully it's all we're here in 12 months time, maybe, with him on the podcast, we're talking about all the success the sport's had in the last 12 months.
Get it right in terms of the CBA negotiations. Get it right and get full-time professionalism for the A-League women. That's all I've wanted for the last 5 years. So I've been covering this game. That's all I'm going to continue to want until it happens. You get it right, get it done, so we can put this behind us and the game can go to the next stage of growth in this country that it's so desperately overdue for.
I would say put the supporters first. The most players of a very, very close second, but supporters number one. They're the most crucial part of the game. If you don't back them, we've seen what will happen. Let's go to the football, shall we? We have another big weekend of A-League men's action coming up. Back to the 6-game roster. We even have Melbourne City versus Macarthur coming up on, I think it's Tuesday night. Are we including that in the predictions game for the YouTube members? Are we including that little seventh fixture?
We didn't, no.
You didn't?
Okay, I guess that's not happening.
I was going to ask. Before I put my prediction in, I was like, can I do that? And
we set the precedent.
City's going to score 6 goals.
We set the precedent that midweek games generally don't count. We set that precedent a long time ago.
That's fair. Okay, well, who's it a big weekend for is our first question. And I'm going to put it out there. Adam Griffiths. He is officially the head coach of Perth Glory till at least the end of the season. I think the club described it as a possible long-term option after that. I don't know whether that's 1 or 2 years or whatever. I think it's fair to say that, Jacob, they were looking elsewhere initially for the role. I don't think that's a secret. But maybe got a couple of no's, and then obviously Griff is in the interim role and does very well. It's clear that the fans are behind him. It's clear that the players are behind him. Obviously he's a bit of a unique character, that Lion, but he's somewhat unifying in that way. Yeah. And people are getting behind him, and absolutely he deserves a crack until at least the end of the season.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, any club worth their salt would be looking at the best possible head coach appointments that they could make, and they would be testing the waters and seeing who's around and who's available, and perhaps putting some offers out there. But when the interim coach is able to build the support that he has done and get results, right, which his predecessor couldn't do, it kind of makes sense if you just stick with him for a while, right? You just go, well, let's write it out and see what he can do and see how it goes. So I think it's great. I love him. I think we need more characters like that in the league, especially ones who can back it up with getting teams to play good football, which is what he's done with Perth so far. So no, I mean, it's certainly going to be a huge weekend for him. I know Matt Olsen is pretty happy as well. He's loved what Griff has had so far. So no, it seems like it's worked well for Perth so far. Obviously things change once it kind of becomes official, right? It's less of that interim, the pressure's off, all of a sudden the pressure's on now because you are the official head coach. But no, I mean, it's pretty cool to see how well it's worked out for them, because a lot of the time it's usually the opposite, right? The interim comes in, it's kind of rubbish, and you want to get rid of them quickly and get that head coach in as soon as you can. But for Perth, it's just I suppose a happy accident that he's come in and he's been able to do a really good job.
Are you on board with the Griffo fever dream?
I mean, I want to see Griffiths do well. I think, when things are going well, he provides some excellent content. And that goes back to what I said, the visibility of the league is that if you can capitalize what are usually pretty boring press conferences, to be honest, where it's ask question, get generic answer, ask question, get generic answer, ask follow-up, no comment, rinse and repeat across 10 of the 12 press conferences every single week. that does tend to get pretty dour pretty quickly. So having someone like Griff, like Valkanis, to shake things up every now and again definitely doesn't go astray. I'm all for it, to be honest, but I think my big weekend, or who I think it's a big weekend for, comes back to MacArthur for mine. I think MacArthur have been under the kibosh a little bit. They've been under the pump. It hasn't been good. They haven't been scoring as well as they should have. They've had some pretty dour games in the last couple of weeks. I know there's been a whole array of illnesses and, everything else that's been impacting the squad. This game against Brisbane presents a good opportunity to get it right. Otherwise, I mean, it's going to be, it looks like it could be a long season for MacArthur, because pending other results this weekend, they could slip further down the table. I know it's a tightly compacted table, but we're at the point of the season where that gap starts to open up, where there's enough games played and enough results coming in where, teams start to fall away. And given, MacArthur won final success, I know they won an Asian Champions League trophy, and I mean, having a look at the Ange Postecoglou of it, if they were to, maybe prioritize Asia a little bit, that could be a different story. But I don't know if the club will buy that, particularly with the top six, just to make the postseason. Like, I think this could be a big turning point weekend for MacArthur. If they can get 3 points, the pressure's off for now, at least. If they, if they fall even further towards the bottom of the table, oh boy, like I think off the top of my head, there's a legitimate chance they could end the weekend at the bottom of the table if I had a look at my maths right. Like
to be fair, I think there's about 8 different clubs that could theoretically finish
that
bottom
fair,
of the table.
But that's what I'm saying. It is so tight, but it could, there's 4 teams all tied on 8 at the bottom: Mariners, MacArthur, Wellington, and Victory. If Victory, Mariners, and Wellington get a point, MacArthur don't, bottom of the table. Yes, it's tight, but that's bottom of the table, still bottom of the table. We've just talked about Arthur Dillers over the last month being bottom of the table.
Yeah, and I think for MacArthur as well, you would have hoped coming out of the end of Asian competition for the year, you're thinking, okay, let's recover a little bit. Let's just get some time, to recover in the legs. That doesn't happen. They had the bye to kind of give themselves a little bit of a break after that game, but they play the Raw on Friday night. Then they have to play Melbourne City on the 23rd, which is a Tuesday, and then they play another Friday night game against the Jets, and then you're into the summer swing of the A-League, where it's only kind of 4 or 5 day breaks as you move through the school holidays.
Yeah, so, I talked about this in the group chat a couple of weeks ago. It is a very compacted schedule for MacArthur coming up, and there was a point I was just about to make, and that's right. I did joke with Mila in a press conference a couple of weeks ago that at least they don't have to go to Perth this year. They've had to go to Perth the last couple of years of this time. They don't have to fly away to Perth this year over the Christmas break.
Jacob, who's it a big weekend for?
Yeah, I was having a look, and to be honest, there's a lot of kind of the same old characters that have we've parroted on about throughout the season. But one that's popped up just after last weekend is Jay Barnett for Adelaide United, who he's got an interesting story himself, obviously coming through with Melbourne Victory. An Adelaide boy, originally moved over to Melbourne, got his opportunity there and never really kicked on. Came back to Adelaide under Carl Veer, was the favoured number 6, even over Isaias at times, which was a big surprise for Adelaide fans. But looked to the business, gets injured, is out for a season, comes back last season and has a really good time. And now Kenny comes in, and it seems like Etienne Andrioli has preferred Luke Drizel to him in the middle of the park this season. And, he's not necessarily had those opportunities. Gets a goal against Melbourne City. And then in the original rivalry last weekend, Bart Fiends goes down with a hamstring injury after 7 minutes. And the reports now from the club are that he's out until at least January, which is a huge blow for Adelaide, considering their well-documented lack of defensive depth, being that they have 2 senior centre-backs in the squad in Panakikianis and Bart Friends. Friends is now down, and it was Jay Barnett that was called on to take up that spot in the centre of defence. And he said, it was pretty weird for him to have to play that deep. But as the game went on, he got more and more comfortable, and it seems like he's really, really accepted that might be the role he has to play this season, if he wants to get those minutes, is to be that guy who's going to be the defensive option more than a midfield option, especially with the way the team's playing this season. So I think he could be a huge weekend for him. I'd expect him to start. The other options in the centre of defence are youth team players for Adelaide United, and it just, as much as Ayrton Andrioli is the former youth team coach and obviously has shown a propensity for using younger players this season, I still think that you want to go with, especially alongside Kikianis, who himself isn't particularly old by any means, going with somebody like Jay Barnett for at least just a little bit of experience, I suppose, could be the play. So it could be a huge weekend for him to kind of, this might be, kind of almost a redirection of his career where he's not maybe able to kick through quite as a midfielder, and this is his opportunity now. We've seen players repurposed into different positions all the time, and this could be a big moment, I think, for him and his career in terms of his viability as a player, is if he can really kick on as a centre-back, this could be huge for him.
Yeah, I like it. In a dream world, now, usually I have a go at everyone else whoever's on the panel, because I see you all sticking to your kind of home clubs and staying close to home, and I usually have a go at you for it, but I'm going to do that today. My inner dream world is that Melbourne Victory just don't concede a goal in the first half of a derby, because it happened in the grand final, Jonathan Cohen, and they were never able to get back in the game. I think it's Max Caputo scored in the third or fourth minute of the first derby of this season as well. And very similarly, Melbourne City are a very tough team to break down once they go ahead. So selfishly, getting in the Christmas spirit, I just want for the Christmas derby to go a little bit longer than 45 minutes, hopefully. Poletti?
My inner dream world is that the attendances start to climb back up from the lows that we saw last week. I think there's, derby aside, I think there's some enjoyable fixtures there where we should see the attendances come back up. In the predictions game, I said my prediction was that Perth we're going to get more than 7,500 people in attendance. It's something they don't usually achieve outside of season openers in the last few years. There's a couple of exceptions here and there. Ironically, usually when the Phoenix come to town, given the distance derby, and I think I saw a Melbourne Victory game that got 10,000 in the last couple of years as well. So but otherwise they haven't really turned up outside of 5,000 or 6,000 dedicated fans each week. And I think the glory times are back, rolling in the right direction, and that the town can get behind the momentum that the Perth are building at the moment. So I think you look at that, you look at the derby, Sydney, admittedly, the second time in 6 weeks they've travelled away to Newcastle, usually can get a good crowd up there. I think that's my dream world scenario, is because I don't have the slightest bit of confidence it's actually going to happen.
Well, surely, Jacob, the Perth game, there's going to be plenty of people there, because they're playing the team that's, located the closest to them in Adelaide United. So no excuse for the fans not to make the trek.
That's right. And I mean, at least in recent history, it's been a pretty good game as well. The Perth-Adelaide games in Perth, even going as far back as I want to say it was the 2018 semi-final, where it finished 3-3 after extra time and a crazy penalty shootout. And, it feels like kind of since then, those games have been pretty high quality and very entertaining. And in a similar vein, that's my my inner dream world, is that we have just some really entertaining games this season. We've had some close games, like a lot of, nail-biting 1-0s and 2-1s and things like that. But it feels like we've really kind of lacked those big, explosive, crazy fixtures that we've had in years past. And maybe we've just been spoiled and we've got, brain rot or whatever. And it's like, if there's not 6 goals in a game, it's rubbish. But it does kind of feel like those fixtures, which have been such a, just a constant in the league over the last few years, have kind of died away a little bit this season. Number one, a lack of scoring goals. Yes, it feels like defenses have actually taken a step up and are doing a good job this year, but it just feels like a lot of the craziness has gone as well. And I don't know, I just want to see a little bit of that back. There's some fixtures here. Obviously, Melbourne Derby is always one you highlight as the potential for that. I think Wanderers Auckland, that could be a hugely entertaining game as well. And like I said, Perth and Adelaide, when those two meet up, are usually pretty fun. So, fingers crossed is that this is the round that kicks things back into normal A-League gear. We get some really entertaining fixtures and some really entertaining games again.
Well, I think that works well, Jacob. The way you look at it is teams are playing more defense this year, and I think some of it is deliberate. If you look at the Brisbane Roar and Michael Valkanis, I remember last season under Zadkovic, they played a 4-4 draw with MacArthur on a Saturday night that was just bonkers from start to finish. You didn't know what was going to happen next. But also, a lot more coaches have been under pressure this year, and so we know that when people are under pressure, things tighten up because you can get a point for a 0-0 draw, but you can't get a point for a 2-0 loss. If you maybe open up a little bit and, don't put the ball in the back of the net at the other end, which I think if you look at it, then when there's been games that have a lot of goals, they haven't necessarily been entertaining games. You look at Melbourne City versus Perth Glory 4-0, the game that got Village sacked, right? That was very much one-sided. If you look at last week, it was 3 goals in 7 minutes for the Jets, but other than that, there wasn't a whole lot going on in that game. And when we've seen, the goals have quite often been one-sided affairs, and that's where I'm going for my worst-case scenario. My worst-case scenario for the Wellington Phoenix is that Chiefy's highline gets exposed yet again, and the Mariners walk away victorious. Now, why I say that is the Mariners have not won a game since before the international break. They've had 3 losses and a draw in that time. If this Wellington Phoenix side can't stop the Mariners, then there's absolutely no hope for them this season whatsoever. I think if you're a fan, rip up your membership. There's no point going to these games. like to be perfectly honest,
you're the one crying on about crowds being rubbish, and here you are saying, there's no point watching.
But if you're turning up to watch your team get smacked every week, it's like it's like that bit from The Simpsons. Hurry up and lose so we can get out of here. That's what it is. That's what it feels like watching the Wellington Phoenix at the moment. I know because I've been speaking to Wellington fans that they're not enjoying turning up anymore because they know what they're going to see, and that's their team getting ripped to shreds.
I take this approach in the group chat with England cricket all day long, and I'm a social pariah, and everyone's telling me how awful I am and what a negative worldview I am. And here's Poletti, the same exact points being made on the podcast.
Jacob, I am so on board with what you just said, 100%. And Poletti, I am irrationally angry at you for 3 different reasons for that prediction. Number one is jumping in with the negativity angle like that, the same as Jacob going what he did with English cricket. Number 2 is you jumped out of order because I wanted to get mine in first. But number 3, the reason why I wanted to get in first is because I thought you were going to go for a specific worst case scenario. So I thought of a second one in my head to allow you to have the one I thought you were going to have. And then you stole mine, the second one that I thought of to cover. So what I am going to say and what I thought you were going to say is that the worst case scenario, MacArthur versus Brisbane on Friday night. 2 weekends ago, we had MacArthur victory, and it was the most boring game of the round. And then the next week, we had Western Sydney Wanderers versus Brisbane Roar, which I saw the comments of on social media and decided not to go back and watch it afterwards, which I usually do for pretty much every A-League game. And we have 2 of those teams playing against each other on Friday night. So the worst case scenario is that it's just a boring 0-0 draw and we waste our Friday nights. But hopefully not. Hopefully it's entertaining.
In my defense, I believe I made this point in the predictions game. I've already talked about that this week. In my defense.
Well, yeah, I think you made it in the group chat, which is why I left it to you. I'm like, it's going to be in their head. They're going to bring it up again.
Yeah.
I'm going to be nice and leave it alone. But anyway, there you go. Jacob, round us off with your worst case scenario.
Mine's kind of an inverse to one you brought up earlier, Lachie. The Melbourne Derby, just the spectacle is not there. Crowds down. Obviously, we saw only 9,000 out of the original rivalry last weekend, which that's just mind-boggling. That's shocking, to be honest. That's really, really poor. And Poletti, I think you brought up that they haven't even sold out. Victory haven't even sold out their active allocation. Like, it just feels
I think they're on track for around about 25,000 is my estimate from ticket sales so far.
Well, then it would be a really worst case scenario if it doesn't, if that's what they're on track for, and then it is a rubbish occasion and nobody turns up for it. But yeah, it kind of feels like like you're saying, the first derby kind of ended after 45 minutes, and everyone was like, routine win for City. Kind of similar, and this could be quite the same. But hopefully Victory have taken some confidence in that win in the original rivalry. Virgos has his scoring boots on now. He's got a brace. He's going to kick on, and we get an entertaining match. But it would be pretty bad for the league if one of its marquee fixtures doesn't really kick off.
Absolutely. All right, there's your weekend look for the upcoming A-League men's round. Now, just before we sign off, obviously, Christian and I did mention it as we were recording Sunday's show. Obviously, now, a few days later, we know a lot more about the circumstances behind the terrible terror incident over in Bondi Beach on Sunday evening. Again, it's kind of hard to put into words the kind of, I guess, disruption to what a lot of people thought that Australia was, that something like this couldn't happen here. 16 people dead is just really horrific. So we stand with everybody. We stand with all Australians, with the Australian Jewish community and anyone who's been affected by this really, really terrible tragedy. Football is such a great thing because it can provide for moments of coming together and healing, and football is for everyone. This country is for everyone. Such is the promise of being Australian. So it's been a very tough week for our country, but football does kind of provide that little escape for us. So we're here all the time. Love to everyone. Hope everyone's doing okay in what has been a pretty tough week. But that'll do for this episode of the Roundball Australia podcast. Stevens and Poletti, thank you for your time today, and we'll see you next week.